Ladies and gentlemen, the 2024 U.S.-China-Hong Kong Forum is a bilingual event in both English and Chinese. Simultaneous interpretation headsets are available for checkout in the lobby. Now, please take your seats. Our event is beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2024 U.S.-China-Hong Kong Forum is a bilingual event in both English and Chinese. Simultaneous interpretation headsets are available for checkout in the lobby. Now, please take your seats. Our event is beginning. after him, I'll introduce Mr. B. Right after him, I'll introduce James. Yep. Then I'm out of here for a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our event is beginning. Welcome to the US-China-Hong Kong Forum, the leading bilateral meeting today and home to ideas, debate and dialogue. Our work is supported by a community of global leaders, including heads of state and government of major economies, from Japan to Canada and Italy to Singapore. Our annual meeting has featured Muhammad Yunus and Jose Ramos Horta, both winners of the Nobel Peace Prize. The Hong Kong Forum is presented by QCEF, the China United States Exchange Foundation, and CCIEE, the China Center for International Economic Exchanges. QCEF was founded on a dream that tomorrow will be better than today, a promise made by our founder and Hong Kong's first chief executive, Mr. Tung Chee-hwa. He believes that the US and China unlock the power and potential of humanity. In trying times, QCEF moves momentum forward through our innovative programs in 4 areas: dialogue, education, culture, and the global goals. At our core, we champion and elevate the voice of young people, so when they speak, they are also heard, and when they're heard, they participate and contribute. 45 years of the modern US-China relationship has propelled us into an era of peace, prosperity, and progress. Now, as we look to the next 45 years,
we have an opportunity to draw on this experience, discover what really matters, and secure the global future. Thank you for your commitment and for joining us on this journey.
From a very early stage, I set this dream to make China good, to continue to be very interested in the United States of America, and try to bring the two countries together. And I told my family, if I have to crawl, I would do it every day of my life to make US-China better.
Ladies and gentlemen, to welcome you to the 5th U.S.-China-Hong Kong Forum, Mr. John Zhao, Chairman of CUSEF, the China-United States Exchange Foundation.
Good morning, friends. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 5th U.S.-China-Hong Kong Forum. It's really wonderful to see all of you here, and it's definitely my honor to open this forum up. I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank our co-host, CCIE, and its chairman, Mr. Bi Jingquan. We're gathering here at an important moment, just 10 days after the very consequential US presidential election. Already, alarms sounded louder with each cabinet appointment announcements by the president-elect, Mr. Trump. Dialogue and cooperation between peoples of US and China at all levels are more important than ever. I think we all agree to this point. This forum serves as a platform for open, honest, and constructive conversations that aim to foster mutual understanding and develop mutual trust. This is our opportunity to contribute to a peaceful and constructive US-China relationship. As we embark on these discussions under the heading of reflection and forecast, let us remember that our goal is not only to address the challenges and complexities we face, but also to explore the vast opportunities for collaboration. So I invite you to engage fully in the sessions ahead. I look forward to what we will all accomplish together over the next 2 days and beyond. Again, thanks for being here and being part of the Hong Kong Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zhao. We now welcome Mr. Bi Jingquan, Chairman of CCIEE, the China Center for International Economic Exchanges.
尊敬的赵令欢主席，各位嘉宾、女士们、先生们，大家上午好！很高兴再次来到香港，与香港中美交流基金会合作举办香港中美论坛。今年是中美建交45周年。1周前，美国总统选举尘埃落定，习近平主席致电唐纳德 特朗普前总统当选美国第47任总统。习近平主席指出，历史昭示我们，中美合则两利，斗则俱伤。一个稳定、健康、可持续发展的中美关系，符合两国共同利益和国际社会期待。希望双方秉持相互尊重、和平共处、合作共赢的原则，加强对话沟通，妥善管控分歧，拓展互利合作，走出一条新时期中美正确相处之道，造福两国，惠及世界。中美关系是世界上最重要的双边关系之一，攸关两国人民的福祉和人类前途命运。45年前，两国领导人以超凡的政治智慧，做出了中美建交的战略抉择，推动了中美关系发展，促进了亚太和全球的稳定与繁荣。中美建交始于中国改革开放之初，45年来，基于比较优势和市场选择，两国形成了结构高度互补、利益深度交融的互利共赢关系。1979年到2023年，中美两国货物贸易额从25亿美元增长到6600多亿美元，双向直接投资攀升到1800多亿美元。中国是美国32个州的前3大出口市场，对华出口为美国创造了93万个就业岗位，近8万家美国企业在华投资，近90%在华的业务实现了盈利。两国缔结了286对友好省州和友好城市关系。中美合作共同应对气候变化、恐怖主义、网络安全等全球性挑战。稳定的中美关系为亚太和全球带来了和平的发展环境。尽管中美关系发展中历经风云变幻，甚至严峻的挑战，但无论从维护两国人民的福祉，还是为维护全球经济稳定，都需要有健康稳定的中美关系作为支撑。我们希望两国在相互尊重的基础上，坚持通过对话、磋商和谈判，妥善解决问题，管控分歧。我们希望两国推动农产品、能源、医药、金融等传统领域的合作，探索数字经济、先进制造、绿色低碳等新兴领域的合作。我们希望两国加强应对气候变化、网络安全、公共健康等多边领域的国际合作，共同推动全球产业链、供应链的安全和韧性，共同维护以联合国为核心的多边合作机制。中国发展的任务还十分繁重，我们有14亿人口，生活在农村的人口还有5亿人，在城市工作但还没有完全融入城市的人口还有近2亿人。无论世界风云如何变幻，中国都要坚定不移地做好自己的事。我们要按照中共20届3中全会的部署，把全面深化改革、推进中国式现代化的要求落到实处。要进一步完善社会主义市场经济体制，把充分发挥市场配置资源的决定性作用，更好发挥政府的作用的要求落实到经济工作的各个方面。要推进价格改革，理顺公用事业、教育、医疗服务价格，完善主要由市场供求决定要素价格的机制，减少政府对价格的不当干预。要加强产权和知识产权的保护，推进科技创新，带动产业创新，完善体制机制，促进优质资源向新质生产力集聚。 要稳步扩大制度性开发，主动对接国际高标准经贸规则，在产权保护、产业补贴、环境标准、劳动保护、政府采购、电子商务、金融领域等实现规则规制管理标准相通相融，打造透明、稳定、可预期的制度环境。要建立全国统一大市场，规范执法行为，营造法治化、市场化、国际化的一流营商环境。唯有破除束缚生产力发展的体制机制障碍，为市场主体创造更多的投资机会，为年轻人创造更多的就业机会，不断增强国内外投资者的信心，才能在国际风云变幻中赢得主动。最后，预祝香港中美论坛取得圆满成功，谢谢大家。
Thank you, Mr. B. Now, please join me in welcoming Mr. James Chow, President of QCEF and World Health Organization Goodwill Ambassador.
Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the US-China-Hong Kong Forum is not a conference but an annual working meeting where people can contribute to the greatest relationship, and they meet here in this international center for finance, commerce and the arts. We proudly call Hong Kong our home. In the past 12 months, the outcomes of this meeting have continued to unfold. First, we achieved a rare expression of unity when the forum was opened last year by Ambassador Xie Feng and Ambassador Nicholas Burns and President José Ramos Horta, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. Second, we supported a dialogue between retired generals and admirals that resulted in a restart of military communications, a breakthrough announced by President Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden in San Francisco. And third, we became the first organization to bring an American college delegation to China after the two leaders made that commitment to expand educational exchanges. This is our impact and this is our story. But that story continues today with your help. As president of QCEF, I made a promise that we'll build on that vision by increasing the voice of women, the voice of young people, and the voice of more countries who are important global stakeholders. You will see us today make good on that promise. Not only do we have more women in leadership roles represented at this forum and the first ever youth program attached to this annual meeting, but also speakers from Europe, Asia, Latin America, and Africa. In fact, over 60% of our speakers this year are new, proof of our celebration of different perspectives and diverse ways of life. We also welcome new partners, such as the World Economic Forum attending the meeting here for the first time, and we're deeply honored to have representatives from 3 US presidential families. The families of President Richard Nixon, who broke the silence during the height of the Cold War, the family of President Jimmy Carter, who normalized relations with Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, and of course President George H.W. Bush, and I suppose you could also say President George W. Bush, whose enduring vision mirrors our own love for the American and Chinese people. This Hong Kong Forum recognizes multiple milestones: 45 years of normalization, 1 year since the San Francisco vision, and 10 days since the US presidential election. QCEF and CCIEE invites you to shape the global future together. Lastly, nobody is more important to us than Mr. Tung Chee-hwa, our founder and chairman emeritus, whose legacy of service we always strive to aspire to. Well, nearly half a century since the creation of modern US-China ties, international leaders are joining now in conversation to stocktake on the 45 years gone by, the 45 years ahead, and the points of collaboration that could save and improve the most consequential relationship of our times. We also promise less speeches this year, so we're going to kick off with a high-level dialogue where we have all of these leaders in concert, locked in conversation. Joining us as our moderator, we're delighted to have with us us Dr. Victor Fung, who is the Vice Chairman of QCEF and Chairman of the Fung Group. His panelists will be Ambassador Charlene Barszewski, Chair of the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, and of course, the 12th United States Trade Representative. Vice Minister Lu Kang from the International Department of the CPC Central Committee, we're extremely grateful that you join us here in Hong Kong today, as we are also His Excellency President Boris Tadic, the first President of the Republic of Serbia, and also Mr. Joseph Tai, a great leader in business and Chairman of the Alibaba Group. Please welcome all of you to the stage.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to actually be moderator of this session. First of all, I really think it is a great moment for us to host this meeting, and I'm especially proud that this meeting is taking place in Hong Kong. I think, having had a lot to do with the U.S.-China relations for QCEF over the years, this is really a very important moment. Really for us to really think through, the U.S.-China relations is, I think, without doubt in my mind, the most important bilateral relationship in the world. However, I think beyond being so important to the two countries, obviously, I think it is also a huge impact on the rest of the world. And especially for us in the private sector, in the business sector, I can tell you this is perhaps the most important thing that we take account of and must take account and really examine in everything that we do today. So I think to explore this relationship, I think we have a very distinguished panel that we have already been introduced, so this is well known to you, and I won't go into further introductions. So let me launch right into our discussion. Charlene, perhaps we can start with you. You have actually been perhaps the person with the most history on this panel about the U.S.-China relations. Your work starting from, the 1990s or even before that, and especially in my memory, Charlene's contribution to really China's entry to the WTO is a milestone event in my mind for the world. So, Charlene, can you actually start off by giving us some historic perspective over the last 45 years, and especially distilling from that some of the key lessons that I think we have to keep in mind as we go forward to the next 45 years. Charlene?
Thank you.
Right here, sorry.
There we go. Yeah. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. It's particularly wonderful to see so many friends, both up here and in the audience. Special thank you to our hosts today. And may I also, if you would indulge me, just say that Tung Chee-hwa was very important to me personally, an advisor, a friend, someone who had endless good sense, common sense, and a friend, as you saw, of the U.S.-China relationship. So my heartfelt thanks to him as well. Thinking about the U.S.-China relationship and going back in time feels like a very long time ago now. At the time, of course, in the early 90s, China had a population of 1.3 billion people, the world's largest standing army, a nuclear power, a country that was beginning to open up on the basis of extraordinary reform put in place by Deng Xiaoping, and a country that wanted to engage with the world in a way not really seen before. In the 1990s, the early 90s, we took all of that and thought, what a wonderful thing to capture this remarkable country, to capture these reforms and opening, and to bring the two countries together, to bring China, help bring China into the global community on a rules-based, market-oriented system. And so we embarked on that project. As you well know, we talked many times about it.
Yes.
And China made extraordinary changes to get into the WTO. And then this reform and opening expanded, deepened. Its scope became very, very broad, and the entire world benefited. There's no question that the globalization of that period brought extraordinary wealth, extraordinary decreases in global poverty, and such. And over time, it was presumed these positive trends would continue. But many things intervened along the way. 2008 financial crisis was a seminal moment, calling into question the Western model. China itself began something of a U-turn from integration toward something rather different. The US began to pull back from its classic leadership role and anchor of the international system. And many other features of the global economy began to change, putting great stress on the bilateral relationship and stress on the original decisions that were so welcoming to China. There are many things we can say about the current situation, but none, I think, more important than the two countries must find a way to get back on track. It's in the best interests of both countries, of the people of both countries, of the world, for stability, for business, and for peace.
Thank you, Charlene. You know, getting back on track, I think is going to be an important question that all of us would discuss. You know, I, for one, have really thought that this bilateral relationship over the last 45 years has done tremendous good for the world. You know, you know, really, if you think about for America, for China, for the rest of the world, we have all benefited. What was the turning point? And what actually made it turn to maybe a situation that we're kind of witnessing today? And maybe if we can understand that and we can actually go back to think about how we might actually, using your words, put the relationship back on track. Where was the turning point? What were the factors then in your mind?
I think the factors were many. China's move toward self-sufficiency, its move to elevate the role of national security above economic policy, its move toward a more ideological basis of exchange rather than a pragmatic basis of exchange. On the US side, deep financial and other problems. The effect of the financial crisis really can't be overstated because it took 10 years for the economy to actually recover and to put people back where they were. A feeling on the part of many in the United States they never got back to where they were, and that somehow globalization and China were to blame for that. Where globalization had been a net positive, it was viewed as a net negative. Where China had been admired, it was viewed as harboring interests antithetical to those of the United States. And of course, a world situation that has become very unstable. The effect of Russia's actions in Ukraine, the Middle East, of course, the South China Sea, the East China Sea. There are many different flashpoints that have emerged into what already was becoming a more populist, nationalistic move on the part of both the United States and China. I don't know that there was any one turning point, but a confluence of all of these issues really found their home in the US-China relationship. I should add one other thing, which is, and I've often thought about this, how did China lose America? How did it lose America? And I think the difference in ambition, the difference in expectation, the move toward not just self-sufficiency, but publicly endorsing a dominance is the word used, of the technologies of the future, of the technologies of future growth, turned economic engagement and integration not into a stabilizing force, but into an absolute rivalry, an adversarial situation. The US, rather than embarking on a program to understand these changes, to work with China, to perhaps understand those differences of competitive and other areas, and come up with a modus vivendi, come up with a way to move toward entente, the US instead started a trade war. This was entirely unproductive, the effect of which was a failure on economic grounds for the United States and the US economy, and of course, only exacerbated the situation that already existed. So I don't think there was one point. I think there were many points, and I think each side believes the other was the perpetrator. Yep. And this has created this very negative dynamic, which, as I said, and you reiterated, of course, in your opening, really must stop. Because, as Henry Kissinger said, and I know we're honoring him later, the US must recognize the permanence of China. China must recognize the permanence of the United States. And therefore, there is no alternative, certainly no alternative we want to contemplate, other than coexistence. So we must find a way to achieve that coexistence.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Johnny. That really puts it in perspective. You know, the way you've summarized it is the US-China relations today has become, you know, really a multi-dimensional, very complex, non-zero-sum game. And I think the way, the attitude of how the two respective players actually participate in this non-zero-sum game is crucial. That we cannot really play this as a zero-sum game and downward spiral. But I really, and there are many multiple complex factors that one has to study and unwind before we can put it back on the right track, in your words. But I'd like to put on record, before we go on to the next speaker, that even with this as the backdrop, the economy, as Mr. B pointed out, the economic development, and indeed even the trade relations between the two countries have continuing. I, for one, you know, and many of us in the business world would see US still as the world's largest market. and the relationship with US companies and multinationals around the world, including China, with other, local companies and so on, is still one of the most important aspects of the global economy. So, in a sense, I'd like to just put on record that we have been able to actually progress the economic side despite this relationship. But I have to tell you, there's a huge opportunity loss because the relationship is not better. If it can be better, we will be actually progressing even so much more. So maybe let me turn to you, Minister Liu. And thank you very much for your presence today. I'd like to perhaps have you start off to talk a little bit about your department, international department, in this CCP Central Committee, just for the perspective. But I think I really like to draw on your expertise in your stint as head of as director of the North China Department, which is the U.S. In my mind, you're the key person focusing on this important bilateral relationship. And the real question I think that Charlene raised, I think is, in today's world, we may be thinking about economic development, but at the same time, we cannot ignore the factor of security. How do you really balance between the need for economic development and security? And do we need some rules, some bounds? Maybe we can get the benefit of your thinking.
Thank you very much, Victor, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to catch up with all of you who have been committed to this very important bilateral relationship. I have to say that we thank you very much, appreciate the invitation for the representative from IDCPC, the International Department of the Chinese Communist Party, to be at this forum. This department, IDCPC, actually is an external branch of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. And basically, what we are doing is to explore and reach out through the party-to-party channel. And so far, we have already set up party-to-party channels in various forms with our partners. I mean, more than 600 political parties in more than 160 countries, including both the Democrats and the Democratic and the Republican in the United States. I should say thank you for the good question. And in answering that, I would also like to address a little bit what you have raised with Ambassador Barshevsky. It's very important when we look into the future prospect of China-US bilateral relationship. It's always very important to draw upon experience from the past. And when you ask the Ambassador Barshevsky what could be the turning point of the trajectory, when she said no, I also had the answer in my mind. And maybe there was no specific turning point on that, especially on part of China. If you look back to the past half century or past 45 years ever since our diplomatic ties, everybody knows that there were ups and downs. There were even crises. We have the two former Chinese ambassadors to the US here. Both of them were my bosses and are still my mentors. And so both of them did experience some of the very difficult moments in the history of this bilateral relationship. Anyhow, I think we were fortunate. Both sides will try to manage that and try to, as Ambassador Barshevsky said, try to get this important bilateral relationship back to the track. But today, many of my interlocutors told me that we are in a totally different situation. I agree with that. But what's the turning point? When Ambassador Barshevsky said no, there might be no, I think on the part of China, that could also be our answer. Because when we look back, it's my understanding China's basic approaches, general approaches to this bilateral relationship basically has remained unchanged. Let me just name a very few. For example, from the very beginning, China's focus on our development at home, I mean the economic development, technological progress, and our national rejuvenation have never changed. That has our focus from the very beginning, no matter what happened at home and abroad and worldwide. So in that context, we have always preferred the United States to being our partners. I can assure you that's still the case for the time being today. Second, China's determination to preserve our core interests along through the development or the evolution of this bilateral relationship also have never been changed. So many people are talking about whether China is becoming more and more assertive on the cross-strait relationship. I think for all those who have been on this bilateral relationship are not unfamiliar with China's attitude from the very beginning on the Taiwan issue. I don't think you are unfamiliar with China's zero tolerance with the separatist moves, forces on the island, and for those external forces condoning that. That's still the case today. Third, for example, China's commitment to the existing multilateral framework have never been changed. Whenever we made the promise, we tried to carry out our obligations. And alongside China's development and our reform at home and opening to the outside, you can find that China is trying our best to align ourselves with the existing rules and frameworks. As Mr. B said in his opening remark, if you look at the decision adopted by the third plenary of the Central Committee of the CPC, you can see that now we are even trying to carry out institutional opening up, even at this very difficult juncture. And he has already outlined a lot of specific areas where we try to meet with the high standards, international standards. But I also have to say that it's very disturbing. Some of the designers of the existing rules or frameworks are now turning their back on what has become the general agreement, for example, as Ambassador Barshevsky just mentioned, on free trade issues. And fourth, I have to say that China's commitment to maintain a stable, healthy, sustainable China-US bilateral relationship have never been changed. In spite of all those difficult periods and the difficulties we are still having now, between China and the US, you know that we have so many issues almost every day. I think we have tried our best to properly manage all those difficulties and try to forge a kind of joint efforts for the benefits not only for our two peoples, but the public worldwide. But I have to say that that's still our wish. You can read that from the readout of the San Francisco summit meeting last year, and you can read that from the congratulatory message from President Xi to President-elect Donald Trump, as read out by Mr. B just now. But I also have to say that it takes two to tango. And we wish for the good. On this, I think there are many emerging issues, as Victor, you just described. For example, how to strike a balance at the security issue and the economic development issue. I think that both of them are very important for any government, for any country. In China, President Xi already said that we should strike at a good balance, equilibrium of security, national security, and economic development. You cannot just compromise either, but you should make either to be more supplementary or complementary to the other. So basically, that's our approach. I think that's still the attitude on the Chinese side. In concluding, I think I'm exhausting the 5 minutes, but in concluding, may I just quote a very, very small conversation. Yesterday, before my departure for Hong Kong from Beijing, I learned from the weather broadcaster there are 4 typhoons approaching this part of China.
We've never had this before.
So I became a little bit worried whether my flight and the flights for all the distinguished guests will be on schedule. But safely, I was a company ambassador to Tiankai, my former boss. Our plane landed very safely and smoothly. So in my conversation, in my chat with the acting chief executive yesterday afternoon, I congratulated him on good luck. He said that Hong Kong actually often experiences this kind of storm or whatever. And of course, we should wish for good luck, but it was lucky that this time Hong Kong did not suffer. But actually, the Hong Kong SAR government also made a lot of preparations, keep people alert on that. So I think he's good. He's right. We can always wish for good, but we cannot just rely on fortune. Yeah. We should just do the right thing and get prepared. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. That was really tremendous. And I must say, Hong Kong has endured typhoon after typhoon. And although this is unprecedented, as you can see, Hong Kong's absolutely back to normal right after the last typhoon. But having said that, I think I'd like to just explore a little bit more this concept of really economic development, which in my mind is central to the world, but recognizing the realities of the need for security. And as you say, both are very, I mean, I don't even say very important, it's crucial. Both are crucial. And how do you balance the two? I think, frankly, may in fact lead much more to the internal dynamics of each country and the internal politics of the country, which means there, going back to your point, Charlene, is the complexity. Maybe that is the new complexity that has made the problem a lot more difficult to resolve. And maybe that is the heart of it. And what are your thoughts on that, Minister Liu? And how might we make some headway on this particular issue when it gets to the need for domestic debate and domestic politics?
It's a good question. As I said, Chinese government has always focused on our development at home, but we need actually a secure environment for that. That's for all the countries. That's the case for all the countries. I know that this is something that we have to struggle with, but we have to bear in mind that it's just natural. Each country will prioritize its own national security. Then we have to have a framework set up in accordance with the multilateral framework that could cover the concern in a best way, in a balanced way, of all parties concerned. I don't know whether I'm right. Maybe Ambassador Barshevsky could correct me, because it's unfortunate that today, even today, in WTO rules, we do not have an agreed concept of what's the national security. So that becomes an issue, and we have already seen so many practices of abuse of this concept in trying to setting up more and more barriers for the facilitation of free trade and investment. So my suggestion would be that, of course, everyone cares about itself, but we need a multilateral framework, a real multilateral framework to work on that.
Very well said. I mean, I can't agree more. I think that may be a topic that we will take up on the panel next, because what's very close to my heart is what about the future of the multilateral system in the midst of all this? It seemed to have been swept off the table. I mean, that to me is the crucial issue. And that may, in fact, provide a way forward for the future, even for the bilateral relation. But let me now turn to you, President Tashish. And thank you very much for, making your way all the way to this part of the world and from Serbia. And your past record in history and your contributions to Serbia and to the European Union, so on, has really been immense, and we really are honored by your presence. I think the thing that is stuck most in my mind is, in the midst of this bilateral relationship that we're discussing, Serbia has managed to really develop a strong relationship with the US and a strong relationship with China. Now that, to me, is a very important thing to explore. How do you do that, And what were some of the issues that you had to deal with? And that really raises the issue in my mind is this bilateral relationship, as important as it is to US and China, is actually crucial to the rest of the world. And I think you're really, in my mind, speaking in a sense for the rest of the world. How do you see this bilateral relationship as it's developed, and what about the future of this bilateral relations and it impacts your country and your world?
Thank you. I'm really honored to have the opportunity to participate in such important forum organized by Yusuf, and I want to congratulate the organizers for everything what they've done, because I consider such relations most important to China and US in global arena nowadays. And I remember when I was young and growing up in Yugoslavia in that time, and that was my country where I was born. In that time, domination was and the conflict between USSR and United States. And our reaction in that time, the leadership of Yugoslavia in that time, was to work on founding non-aligned movement. That was the way how we reacted on Cold War and the conflict between USSR and United States. And non-aligned movement was very important in multilateral institutions that we are mentioning right now. But multilateralism is somehow day by day dying. We don't see influence of multilateral institutions in the world nowadays. And I see that as one of the most important threats to our common civilization. When I became a president of Serbia, we've been facing with a lot of challenges. That was just 5 years after being in the war against NATO. NATO was bombing Serbia in that time, 1999. And one of the most significant moments in that horrible war was dismantling Chinese embassy. I was living in that time 900 meters far from the Chinese embassy. And that was a night I was facing with a real problem. And, but nowadays I'm asking myself whether someone can imagine that NATO or some big power is bombing Chinese embassy. This is not possible. This is only 25 years after this event, and this is crystal clear evidence that how things are changing very fast, and we are living in fundamentally, totally different world. And your question was how we can imagine the world in the future. What is going to be with us in next 25 years? What about trading, economy, technology, bilateral relations, multilateral relations? And we need right now a kind of expertise in politics which is characterized by vision. It's very important. And to work on creating pavement towards such a world with concrete steps. As a president of Serbia in that time, I was thinking what to do because that was 5 years after bombing. Serbia aspired to become member state of European Union. We are European countries. We are European culture. We are a small country. After dismantling former Yugoslavia, we've been 9 million people after living in a country with 23 with a significant international influence. And I thought about perspective. And I was president who established the policy, foreign policy, multi-vectors policy. I said, okay, we are going towards European Union. This is our main goal, but we have an interest to have extremely close relations with the United States, Russia, and China. I signed strategic partnership with the president of China in that time, Hu Jintao. Right now, we have a comprehensive strategic partnership between two countries. We have a significant investments from China in Serbia. We are one of the cornerstone of Chinese political and economic relations with Eastern European countries. Some of them are member states of European Union, some of them are aspiring to become member states of European Union. And this is how we are contributing to the multilateralism in our corner of the world. Many people were asking me, how you are signing strategic partnership with China? Such a small country, Serbia, 9 million people, 1.5 billion people, China. But I told them, we are strategic partners in this small corner of the world, Southeast Europe. That was our attempt of a contribution to our relations. And before we came here, when I was aware about our topics, I said to explain Serbian relations with China and the United States is how to survive in between two elephants, big animals. And this is really something like that. But if I may say what I see as a main problem we are facing with the experience of the former leader of the very small country. Despite of the disputes in economy, in security, one of the main problems I see is a lack of understanding. Lack of understanding is in fact a real threat. Not only in terms of bilateral relations, China and United States. Lack of understanding is a real threat for our common world. China is a not best possible player in explaining about Chinese desires and strategy. United States for many centuries starting to analyze the rest of the world from the podium of, let me say, arrogancy. Because the United States consider themselves as the biggest power, they are still the biggest economic power and military power in the world, controlling 48% of the military capacities in the global arena. But the world in which we've been existing all together is not existing anymore. This is past. And this is not world of the domination. Few weeks ago, I was watching the video, fantastic dialogue between two extremely intelligent people, Professor Misheimer from Chicago University and Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University. I like them. I know them. I'm working with them. I'm talking with them. And Misheimer has explained, we have, as United States, interest to keep our domination. And the main threat for us is China. Jeffrey Sachs have said, the main threat from United States is not China, is a new technology. Nuclear power and a new technology. Totally different views. Two, from my point of view, after Kissinger, most respected intellectuals in political arena in the United States. But totally different view. And I was thinking, what about Chinese considering the world nowadays? What we have is such a dialogue between extremely intelligent Chinese intellectuals, political intellectuals, and how they are going to define the world and the main threats for the world nowadays. And I see that communication between Chinese and American intellectuals and politicians are very weak. I don't know about economic sphere. Do we have a real dialogue with your partners or competitors in the United States? Yes. But we don't have a communication. We have a problem how to explain our desires, our interests, and we are living in a so vulnerable world. So I'm witnessing, I'm pretty old, but I'm witnessing the development of the world. I think this is the moment, the most vulnerable in past 7 decades, 8 decades, and one of the most dangerous moments in our common history. And in that respect, lack of understanding and the problem in communication can bring us in a conflict which can destroy whole world. And I'm talking about this because many people are talking about Taiwan, South China Sea, Eastern China Sea, United States, Pacific, Donald Trump, Xi Jinping. But I have to underline lack of understanding and very bad communication as one of the most difficult threats. That's what I consider very important.
Thank you so much, President Tadish. I mean, you, first of all, have spoken what is in the minds and hearts of a lot of countries outside of US and China. You know, this idea that we need to look after ourselves at the same time within this world, which is dominated by, you know, two elephants. And then also, you know, the crying out loud for, please don't make us choose. And how do we maintain that balance and really strike our own path? And I thank you for, you know, voicing that, you know, really for those countries in that part of the world. And I think what you said about lack of understanding and the need for engagement, in a sense, you have actually put in front of us now the spirit of this conference. Why are we here? We're here because we'd like to do something about addressing that very issue that you're talking about. I think I have a lot of hope for the future of the relations if we're able to continue that dialogue, that engagement, and try to take away that lack of understanding. So may I ask you, President, you have any concrete ideas about how we can actually increase the engagement and maybe involving not just US and China, because forever that'll be a kind of a, you know, hopefully not developing into a zero-sum game, but it will be a lot of, you know, back and forth. But what about the participation of third countries like yourself and other third countries?
I think this is, that can be useful. I mean, Serbia on the West was considered not the Western country. We are Europeans, but they always said, you are different Europeans. Yes, we are. We are, and I'm proud of that. I like it. And we talked before with Joseph, we talked about before this conference, and he underlined that he's owning the basketball team in the United States. And
the New York Nets.
Yeah, he mentioned that the best player is Serbian guy, Nikola Jokic nowadays, and coming from a very small country, which is playing in a totally different way. He's not playing with the rules of NBA, but he's the best for 4 years. He's a game changer. And maybe we can be game changer. We can be game changer. And now I'm going to try to explain how I see situation. First of all, I fully agree with the Jeffrey Sachs, who have said, we have an ocean between us. Keep distance. If we are not keeping distance, we are coming to the high-risky situation. Do you know why? When two frigates and the ships, military, are approaching to each other, the commanders are calling alert. If we are approaching to each other in unpredictable way, by no announcing to each other we are coming, this is extremely dangerous. First of all, let's define the rules. Keep distance. Because we have a they have a military weapon, they have nuclear bombs, they can destroy the world. Second, let's think about not only China and the United States, but also other big powers, for example, Russia, and their interests, and let's try to respect also Russian interests, and to consider that interest in the wider context. And India, which is coming to the podium to be global power. And also, let's think about Iran, Turkey, South Africa, and Brazil. They are going to be also significant powers in the period ahead of us. If we are ignoring interests of other countries, if we are trying to continue domination, this is not functioning, this is not working. This is not working. Everyone can destroy the whole world who has a nuclear power. And this is why I think that we have to have a totally different strategy. And finally, I'm finishing with it. we are human beings. We are not perfect. We have a kind of problems, always. We are beautiful, human beings are beautiful, but also we are able to destroy the world. And what is one of the worst characteristic of our human beings? Stereotypes and prejudices. We are full of stereotypes and prejudices. In the context of lack of understanding, this is disaster. The Western world is analyzing China as a kind of alien. I want to congratulate and to thank Ambassador and Henry Kissinger and everyone from the United States who has been working on making closer relations. But still, we have such prejudices. I'm every month in China. I'm lecturing on Chinese universities. I'm trying to be interlocutor. And I see also kind of prejudices. But lack of understanding is crucially important. I remember always a book of the Huntington, Clash of Civilization. We are living in a clash of civilization. But the other book, which was very important for Fukuyama, The End of History. Come on, this is beginning of history. This is not the end of history. This is really beginning of history. This is totally different moment. Who is not understanding that is the enemy of the future of the mankind. And I think that we need more political expertise, we need more experts in political spectrum, and the people that can, like you, organize such a conferences everywhere. I'm participating in different forums. I'm going from here to Bangladesh on Bengali forum. I see my friend, Prime Minister Yunus is going to deliver his speech. And also my friend Jose Ramos Horta, Nobel Prize winner, fantastic person who established peace between Indonesia and Timor-Leste. After that, I'm going to be on COP29 in Baku about global warming, which is also a threat for all of us. And after that, Alliance of Civilization in Lisbon, that is going to be also opportunity to talk about this relation. With your permission, I'm going to talk about this conference. But whenever we are talking with each other on some conferences, we have to take into the consideration the most important relations between China and the United States. And such conferences, I think more conferences like this is helpful. More expertise, more interlocutors, this is very, very important. I mean, this is only way how we can find practical solutions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, President. This is right on the mark. And I really thank you personally for everything that you're doing, and very thankful that you're really part of the cause that we at CUSIF, the China-US Exchange Foundation, is trying to actually do in that dialogue. And really thank you for that. You know, and what you've also mentioned, this idea of, you know, to begin to unscramble this entanglement between economics and security. Maybe the first step is rules of engagement on the security side that would actually, hopefully, allow some stability and ring fencing, if that's the right word, of the security issue, so we can really focus on the economic. And maybe the first step towards that are sort of multilateral agreement on the rules of engagement on the security side. And that, I think, you know, is the remark really made a lot of impact on me, because everybody is dealing with how do you unscramble this entanglement between security and development. So, may I now turn to you, Joe? Change of pace. Let's put on our businessman's hat, talk about the economics. You know, I don't want us to just focus on geopolitics and sweep away, which I think is the big elephant in the room. What the hell do we do about the economy? You know, that's ultimately people's livelihood and what's really important to all of us at the end of the day. So from your standpoint, Joe, you know, you're one of the, you know, really most important businessmen in this region, if not the world, and you've seen it all. How are you handling this? And especially from your perspective, not any specifics, but from generally from the perspective of a new factor that's introduced into this whole equation in my mind is how fast technology is developing globally, how it impacts the business, the economy, and how it impacts security, to be honest. What is your perspective? And really, please, put on a businessman's hat. How do you see this? How do you work your company in the midst of what we have discussed up to now?
Yeah, Victor, thank you so much for the question. And I do want to thank QCEF for giving me the opportunity to exchange views in front of such distinguished guests and also a very distinguished panel here. Before I address your question, Victor, I do want to echo something that President Tadich have said about the lack of communication and lack of understanding. I'm from Taiwan. I was born and raised in Taiwan with parents originally from Shanghai. And so on the issue of Taiwan, it's something that is absolutely important for the Chinese people and the Chinese government. I still remember Dr. Henry Kissinger once said that before the normalization of relationships between the United States and China, the two countries met, the representatives from the two countries met 160 times on the issue of Taiwan. And there have been 3 joint communiques on that particular issue. So I have to ask today, people that are in the American government, how many of them actually have understand this history and have read the communiques? And that's, I'm saying that because a lot of understanding is based on history, based on the historical development. And I would say today's position of China on Taiwan has not changed, and it's derived from those discussions and those communiques. So I say that to say that the understanding has to be, people really have to go back to history. And I think it's quite relevant that we're going back to 45 years of history. But before, I want to address the technology question specifically, but the 45 years has been relevant to Alibaba for the last 25 years. I can't say 45 because we've only existed for 25 years, founded in 1999. And in fact, the first website that Alibaba has developed was in English language. It is in English language because it was a site for us to put all the information of Chinese manufacturers on the site for people who want to source globally. Americans, Europeans, people who want to buy manufactured products. And it was back in 1999, really on the cusp of China entering the WTO in 2001. And thank to Ambassador Barshevsky, who worked so hard to make that happen. Alibaba flourished because of the WTO, because you literally have millions and millions of small businesses, small factories in China that can now directly export to the United States and to the rest of the world. And that was because of the China's entry into the WTO. And since those times, I have seen China evolve from a manufacturing base, and today it is still a manufacturing powerhouse because China still has the largest population of most industrious people and highly educated people. But we have evolved, China has evolved from being a manufacturing base to now also the world's largest consumer market. And again, you think Alibaba is a consumer shopping website because of Taobao, but Taobao didn't really take off until 10 years after we started that import-export website. So I've tracked the development of China's development is very much supporting and underlies the development of Alibaba today. And today, by all counts, there's about 400 million middle-class consumers in China that want to buy, that want to consume. They want to buy from all over the world. And that's the opportunity for a lot of companies. And Mr. B has talked about American companies, 80,000 American companies doing business in China, and 90% of them are profitable. The last time I checked, American companies make over $10 billion US dollars of operating profits in China. And it's a very, very good symbiotic relationship between China and the United States. So that's the backdrop, because I'm just looking at it from my own Alibaba experience. Your question about technology, it's actually one of the most difficult issues to address. And that's because technology has become the flashpoint of tension between the United States and China. From the United States standpoint, the rise of China as an economic power is, they're fearful of it, but specifically the technology, they're fearful that technology will drive further economic gains. And from China's perspective, all the restrictions that's been put in place today, for example, export restrictions on high-end chips and things like that, is really an excuse. Technology as the flashpoint. I hope that the next set of conversations between China and the United States can focus on some of the not direct issues, because technology is direct. NVIDIA chips cannot be exported to China. That's a bilateral issue. But I think the conversation can start with multilateral issues. We have trouble spots in the world. There's Russia, Ukraine, there's Israel, Iran. In those areas, both countries have common interests. And if the conversation can start with, get people getting together and figuring out how do we resolve some of these hot conflicts, rather than focusing on the trade or tariffs, or the trade, tariffs, technology restrictions are bilateral issues. But I think maybe there are trouble spots in the world that are even more important to resolve than focused on these flashpoints.
Thank you very much, Joe. I'm so glad you're able to give that perspective. Because as I said earlier, I think at the end of the day, I'm biased, but it's about economics and people's livelihood. And we've got to bring ourselves back to that. But on the question of technology, I mean, you're the expert, and I can't agree with you more. I think perhaps one way of thinking through this and making it not a flashpoint, which it is really to still think about not only bilateral, but on a multilateral basis, how we can all work together to apply technology to solve some of the big problems in the world today, like technology to actually civilian use and how to make the world better. And that, I think, is a common goal and could be a focal point for the future of multilateral discussions. But anyway, thank you very much for that. Time is really marching on. So I think I'm going to wrap up the panel by really talking now about the other part of our agenda, which is what about the next 45 years. But very quickly, because of lack of time, one theme that's ran through all your discussions is, at the back of my mind, is what about the future of multilateralism? How can we think about this bilateral relationship in the context of the multilateral system, not just in isolation? So maybe, and I will start with Charlene and then go maybe you can just give a 1-minute thing on what you think about the future, the next 45 years. And Charlene, take a little more time because I'd like you to give your views on the multilateral. You're the expert here.
I think the multilateral system faces extraordinary challenge. And those challenges have been evident for at least a generation. Multilateral system is very slow. It is behind. It took 10 years for the Uruguay round of global negotiations to conclude. The Doha round of global communications has never concluded. We're approaching year 25. And technology, of course, is a blip in the WTO. Agriculture and commodities remain the largest sectors of focus. So the system is antiquated, it is old, it is a generation behind the times, it is unwieldy, and because unanimity is required, any one country can raise its hand to say, I don't think so, not today, and the negotiations stop. Needs to be revamped. There needs to be an executive committee. There needs to be a complete rethink of how the system should work, because otherwise there is no multilateral trade forum that is usable.
I think that's tremendous, Charlene. I think as much as we have worked in the old system, we have to admit that we really need a new multilateral system. And maybe the solution to that is also a way of actually doing something about the bilateral relations and kind of put it in the context of a new multilateralism and a totally different perspective on how that bilateral relationship can develop. So how about the next 45 years for the bilateral? Just a quick thought.
45.
Where do you think it's going to go? How are you going to make it better?
I think it's impossible to say. 45 years ago, would you have thought China would be where China is today? 45 years ago, would you believe you are where you are today? So I think it's very hard to hypothesize. The only thing I would say is that for countries, if you are resilient economically, resilient in terms of security, resilient in terms of the cohesiveness of your society, then the next 45 years, the good and the bad, will wash out. But if you're not resilient, if you are divided, if you are incapable of lending security to your national aspirations and to individual aspirations, then you are in reactive mode. Then the world buffets you around, and the result is improvisational reaction, improvisational relationships, absolute instability. So for my money, the next 45 years ought to focus on resiliency.
Can't agree more. And resiliency in generational terms, and not react to the current happening here and there. Minister Liu.
1 minute.
1 minute thought on the next 45 years on the bilateral relations.
Of course, we wish for good, and as many of my colleagues here mentioned, I think it's very important to enhance the mutual knowledge, mutual understanding of each other. As I just mentioned in my opening remark, I think Chinese people still believe that it's our legitimate right to equal development, I mean economic, in economy, in science and technology, whatever. So in that way, we still prefer that we have good partners. Then we should come into the question why there is a misunderstanding. For our part, we are still eager to carry out or go through this kind of very meaningful discussion with our American interlocutors to find why they are very suspicious about Chinese ambitions, what China is going to do with our growing power, our growing economy. So long as we are addressing the real benefits of our two publics, we still believe in, some of my colleagues here on the panel already mentioned that, we still believe in that zero-sum mentality is not a way out. We still believe in that China and the US, if we could work together and with our international partners, we could create a bigger pie that everybody could have a bigger share. So that's my wish for the prospect.
Thank you. Very well said. President Tadish?
Well, we need a new world orders. But who is going to establish new orders, new world orders? The big powers member state of the Security Council of United Nations. We cannot imagine that Serbia is going to establish new world orders. But disputes and totally different interests are characterizing the relations between big powers. Look, Russia and the United States. Situation is disaster. What about European Union? Where is European Union? Is European Union only to follow United States policy or not? Few weeks ago, I was writing an article in which I was asking whether the United States are going to follow also totally different policy of is European Union going to follow strictly United States policy if Trump is going to win? Because Trump is coming. And we cannot expect that, we are not expecting that it's going to be full continuation with the policy of Democrats. But nowadays, a disaster situation among the European Union leaders. And my question is, who is going to establish new world orders? I don't have an answer on that question. But without multilateralism, we don't have a cooperation. Without cooperation, we are going to be in a most difficult situation. This is the main issue. We cannot count only on bilateral relations. This is why I think this is the new challenge we are facing with. This is about multilateralism. What about to reestablish United Nations system? This is our common goal.
Thank you. Encasing the future in terms of a new world order, a new multilateralism, may in fact be the way to converge and not play the way the zero-sum game is going to lead us. So, last but not least, Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, the next 45 years, I'll answer in terms of technology. Right now, the direction is decoupling between the two countries in terms of technology. If you look at AI and all this, maybe it'll last maybe the next 5 years. But if you look at over the next 45 years, I think this decoupling is going to reverse for two reasons. Number one, it's very expensive and it takes very long to develop key technologies. And there should be a division of responsibility in terms of some technologies where the countries can collaborate together. It would be less costly that way. And number two, the United States and China are not the only countries in the world. There are third-party countries. So they're not going to choose, I only use American technology or I only use Chinese technology. They're going to stay neutral and find the best of breed technology. And so at some point, this trend of decoupling, people will realize it's just silly. And people need to work together on that.
Bravo. I think that is absolutely the way to end this morning's session. I think really we've had a wonderful time, and all that's left for me to do as your moderator is to thank our wonderful panelists. Thank you very much, and thank you.
If you all could please stay on stage for a group photo. Please stay on stage for a group photo. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Dr. Victor Fung, to Ambassador Barjewski, to Vice Minister Lu Kang, President Tadic, and of course, Mr. Zhou Cai, for enlightening us with that high-level conversation. It is a tradition of the Hong Kong Forum that each year, starting last year, we have had the ambassadors of both countries address this audience. We'll be hearing from Ambassador Nicholas Burns, but we'll be hearing first from His Excellency Ambassador Xie Feng. He is from Jiangsu. He served as ambassador to Indonesia. Of course, many people remember him from his time here in Hong Kong when he served here as the Foreign Ministry's commissioner. And before his current posting to Washington, he was Vice Foreign Minister of China. Please welcome His Excellency Ambassador Xie Feng.
Chairman Jiang Zhao, Chairman Bi Jingquan, Vice Minister Lu Kang, President Boris Tadic, Chair Charlene Barjewski, Ambassador Nicholas Burns, Ambassador Max Baucus, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. It gives me great pleasure to join you in Hong Kong virtually. From 2017 to 2021, I had the honor to serve as Commissioner of the Foreign Ministry of China in the Hong Kong SAR. Time flies. That has been nearly 4 years since I left, but I still hold fond memories of my friends there. So first of all, let me extend my warm congratulations to the successful opening of the US-China Hong Kong Forum, and also my best wishes to friends old and new. As we mark the 45th anniversary of China-US diplomatic relations, and as the US presidential election has drawn to an end, the theme of this year's forum, reflection and forecast, is highly relevant. History, if not forgotten, can serve as a guide for the future. Over the years, the China-US relationship has traveled an extraordinary journey, bringing tremendous dividends of peace, stability, and development to both countries and the world. History tells us that when China and the United States work together, we can make a big difference. If we confront one another, turbulence, division, and disaster would ensue. Going forward, the relationship is again at a new historical starting point. Both our peoples and the world are watching closely where it will head. President Xi Jinping has called for joint efforts to enhance dialogue and communication, properly manage differences, expand mutually beneficial cooperation, and find the right way for China and the United States to get along with each other in the new era. A stable, sound, and sustainable China-US relationship is in our common interests, and mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation represent the right path to take. The two sides need to strengthen dialogue and communication. We are the world's two largest economies, permanent members of the UN Security Council, and nuclear power states. Turning our back on each other is not an option. Conflict or confrontation would have consequences neither side can afford. In Chinese culture, we believe whenever there is an issue, the best way forward is to sit down and talk it through. While China and the United States each have our own concerns, we can well put the issues on the table, have candid communication, and find a solution through equal-footed consultation. It would be ridiculous if the very word dialogue should become a taboo, which would mean a chilling return to the Cold War era estrangement and confrontation. The two sides need to let dialogue and win-win results define our interactions, not confrontation or zero-sum mentality. We need to enhance dialogue at various levels and in various fields, eliminating misunderstanding and miscalculation, expand common interests, and foster closer ties between our two peoples, so as to inject fresh impetus into China-US relations. China is always open to dialogue. We welcome more exchanges between our peoples, and we are willing to be partners and friends of the United States. We hope the US side will also move with us in the same direction. The two sides need to properly manage differences. Time has changed. Past tragedies of major country conflict should not be allowed to repeat. It is important to ensure the giant ship of the China-US relationship will not lose direction or speed, still less having a collision. As the Chinese saying goes, the finer details will fall into places when they are aligned with the bigger picture. We need to view and handle China-US relations from a strategic and long-term perspective. China has no plan to overtake or displace the United States. We hope the US side will also have no intention to contain or suppress China. We need to focus more on our common interests instead of being preoccupied by differences and allowing them to dominate the headlines. We need to respect each other's core interests and major concerns, properly manage differences in a constructive manner, and minimize negative factors. The Taiwan question is at the very core of China's core interests and is the bedrock of the political foundation of China-US relations. If mishandled, it could be the biggest flashpoint that may trigger conflict and confrontation. Any forces trying to play Taiwan as a card would be playing with fire. To truly uphold peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, one should commit to the One China principle and the 3 Sino-US joint communiques in both word and deed, and unequivocally oppose Taiwan independence. The 2 sides also need to expand mutually beneficial cooperation. China-US cooperation is never a zero-sum game, nor a one-way street where one party gets all the benefits. Otherwise, how could our economic cooperation grow to the current size? Economically, our total trade has exceeded $660 billion, and over 70,000 American companies are doing business in China, earning a profit of $50 billion annually. In terms of employment, exports to China alone support 930,000 jobs in the United States. In terms of livelihood, Chinese products have not only offered American consumers more choices, but also lowered costs for them. The Chinese investment has not only created more jobs in the United States, but also bolstered local economies. Our interests are so deeply intertwined that decoupling and disrupting supply chains do not make economic sense and simply will not work. Trade war or tech war is a double-edged sword. Why should anyone opt for something that serves nobody's interests? The earth is big enough for China and the United States to develop respectively and prosper together. Our 2 countries should be a boost, not an obstacle to each other's development. From traditional areas like economy and trade, agriculture and energy, to emerging challenges such as AI and public health, the 2 sides enjoy vast room for mutually beneficial cooperation. Dear friends, throughout the decades, with the courage and wisdom of both sides, the China-US relationship has braved wind and rain and forged ahead against all odds. Today, we need to set out again. The 2 sides should and can find the right way to get along on this planet. To do that, the support from people from both countries, including all of you here, is indispensable. I would like to thank the China-United States Exchange Foundation for its important contribution to promoting bilateral exchanges and cooperation over all these years. Hong Kong has unique strengths as it enjoys backing of the motherland and is open to the world, and has restored order and is set to thrive. The interests of Hong Kong and the United States are also deeply interconnected. Therefore, a prosperous and stable Hong Kong serves the common interests of China and the United States. Let's work together to seize opportunities and remove disruptions, so as to let Hong Kong shine brighter as an international financial, trading, and shipping center, and usher in a better future for the Pole of the Orient. Thank you very much.
We thank very much Ambassador Xie Feng for his address. And now the United States Ambassador Nicholas Burns was, of course, a spokesperson for the US Department of State and ambassador to NATO. He really has become known as an international relations scholar and also diplomat, and is currently on leave from the Harvard Kennedy School while he serves in Beijing. And during that time he's been serving in Beijing, he really has come across as a real champion for people to people and bringing all those people, that alliance of 1.8 billion people, together. Please welcome His Excellency Ambassador Nicholas Burns.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Beijing. I'd like to begin by thanking the chairman of the China-US Exchange Foundation, John Zhao, and the vice chairman of the China Center for International Economic Exchanges, Bi-Jing Chuan, for the invitation to speak with you this morning. I also want to greet my friends and colleagues at our Consulate General in Hong Kong, my friend Consul General Greg May and his team, my predecessor and friend, former Ambassador Max Baucus, the great U.S. Trade Representative Charlene Barshevsky, who played such a major role in this relationship, and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for China and Taiwan, Rick Waters, who's a close colleague of mine when he was in the U.S. government. There are many distinguished participants attending this forum. I'd like to also acknowledge, of course, my counterpart in Washington, Ambassador Xie Feng, who spoke to you just now. I wish I could be with you in person, but due to the press of business, I had to remain here in Beijing. I was very pleased to meet some of you when I visited Hong Kong in March of this year, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today about the U.S.-China relationship. It is obviously a complicated relationship, and one that is, at its core, competitive. Over 45 years of diplomatic relations, we've seen our relationship evolve, certainly into the most consequential bilateral relationship of any in the world. That global significance makes it absolutely critical that we manage our relationship and our competition in a responsible way and peacefully. And that's why we spent the past 18 months engaged in extraordinarily intense diplomacy between our government and the government in Beijing to restore the channels both of our governments needed to communicate and to manage our differences. I'm pleased to report that thanks to the tremendous work on both sides, that effort has largely succeeded. After months of very little high-level communication between our governments in 2023, we had Secretary Blinken visit Beijing. In the middle part of that year, we saw a series of high-level engagements from Secretary Janet Yellen, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Podesta, Secretary Raimondo. They all came to China over the last 18 months. The Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer of the Senate, led a bipartisan congressional delegation to China, to Shanghai and Beijing, the first in 5 years. And China's officials came to the United States. Director Wang Yi met with President Biden and Secretary Blinken about a year ago, and Minister of Commerce Wang Wentao also came to meet with Secretary Raimondo and Ambassador Catherine Tai. This all culminated, as you know, in the Woodside Summit roughly 1 year ago when President Biden and President Xi met outside of San Francisco. Thanks to all these efforts, we've seen progress on some areas of cooperation. We've resumed military-to-military communications, something that's critically important for our two militaries that operate in such close proximity to each other in the South and East China Seas. Our presidents also agreed to cooperate in attacking the scourge of fentanyl, the leading cause of death in American society. Together, we've taken important steps to reduce the flow of dangerous precursor chemicals to the cartels in Mexico and Central America, but much more work is needed. We're also tackling climate change, which our two countries have a shared responsibility to address as the largest carbon emitters in the world. And we've established various working groups on commercial, economic, financial, and agricultural issues, and we established an information exchange on export controls enforcement. Last but not least, both President Biden and President Xi committed to strengthening people-to-people ties. These bilateral engagements allow for conversations that, while are often quite difficult, they help drive down the probability that competition veers into conflict. They also demonstrate our commitment to managing this relationship responsibly. Because competition remains the defining feature of the relationship, the U.S. and China are strategic competitors, and I expect our relationship will remain fiercely competitive for many years. We have major differences that we must address. Despite decades of reform and opening, the PRC still discriminates against American businesses and investors. We want to see progress on intellectual property and an end to forced technology transfers, unfair subsidies, and other measures that tilt the playing field against American companies in China. We're deeply concerned with the after effects of the counter-espionage law, the amended state secrets law, and other recent measures. These efforts to effectively criminalize corporate due diligence and the sharing of routine economic data increase risk, and they undermine China's investment climate. On trade, Beijing is trying to restore its economic growth by investing in even more manufacturing capacity. This strategy relies on Beijing trading partners absorbing a flood of underpriced exports at the expense of our own workers and our own businesses. We have an obligation to American businesses, particularly in manufacturing, to prevent a second China shock. That is why President Biden, quite rightly, raised tariffs on Chinese EVs, lithium batteries, and other technologies. And on the subject of technology, as we've made clear time and again, we will ensure that American technology, capital, and know-how are not used to undermine U.S. national security. We cannot and will not compromise on this point. We will also never back down from promoting our core interests and values, sanctioning Chinese companies exporting dual-use technologies to support Putin's illegal war in Ukraine, promoting freedom of navigation and the rule of international law in the South China Sea, and defending our ally, the Philippines, from illegal and ill-advised Chinese aggression, and arguing that the PRC should commit to a peaceful resolution of differences in the Taiwan Strait. We want to advance our deep and cherished commitment to human rights and human freedoms in Xinjiang, Tibet, and yes, in Hong Kong itself. We have many critical differences with China. I want to be equally clear, however, that the United States is not seeking to decouple from China. As Secretary Janet Yellen has rightly said, decoupling would be a disaster for both of our economies. While bilateral trade has declined over the past 2 years after a record-setting 2022, the PRC remains our third largest trading partner, and we are the PRC's top trading partner ourselves. We want healthy, fair, two-way trade and investment to continue. Our de-risking measures are serious and warranted and very important, but we do want to see trade and investment continue in the great bulk of our current economic relationship. Our approach contrasts sharply, by the way, with the PRC's broad, opaque, and highly restrictive controls on high-tech exports, data, and both inbound and outbound investment. So again, our relationship is competitive and will remain competitive for many years to come, but we are now better connected and better able to manage that competition between the two governments in a responsible way. As we mark the 45th anniversary of U.S.-China diplomatic relations, it is fitting that you are honoring two great leaders, and thank you for doing this, honoring President Jimmy Carter and honoring our former Secretary of State, the late Henry Kissinger. Thank you for doing that because, much like today, historical complexities in geopolitics shaped the U.S.-China relationship when it entered the modern phase 45 years ago. Despite differing politics, both President Carter and Secretary Kissinger, and I must say, led, of course, by President Nixon, shared the conviction that the U.S.-China relationship was critically important. Driven by this conviction, both President Carter and Secretary Kissinger helped establish the foundation for our contemporary diplomatic and economic relationship. So I'd like to join you in recognizing the important contributions they made, both of them, to the U.S.-China relationship. And it is in that spirit that I would note that our two governments have an obligation to manage the bilateral relationship in an effective way. But it is the Chinese and American people from all walks of life, students, business people, young professionals, musicians, artists, athletes, academics, they're the ballast in the ties between our two countries. As we look to 2025, we in U.S. Mission China will work to support the incoming administration of President-elect Donald Trump to help he and his new team to succeed in this complicated, complex, and yet vital relationship with China. We held an election watch party at our embassy in Beijing to observe the results of the election last week. I told the hundreds of Chinese guests who were present that you can't call yourself a democracy if you don't allow citizens to vote their leaders in or out. As the American ambassador here in China, I was never so proud to see the American people exercising their sacred right to vote. The right to vote is the keystone of our democracy, and our democracy is surely the best and most just form of government in the world today, as it will continue to be for the future. So thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. I hope you have candid, productive discussions. I wish you all the best for your time in Hong Kong. Xie xie nin.
Our deep appreciation and best wishes to Ambassador Nicholas Burns speaking to us there from Beijing. So we had the high-level dialogue, and now 10 days after the United States presidential election, this opening panel takes a deep dive into the implications of those outcomes, the likely China policy of the next American leader, and how this could shape the conditions for security, the economy, and of course, shared global challenges. This is going to be a fantastic discussion and will be moderated by Professor Da Wei, who is the Director of the Center for International Security and Strategy at Tsinghua University. And joining him on this panel is Ambassador Max Baucus, the longest-serving senator from Montana and the 11th U.S. ambassador to China. Joining us online will be Christopher Nixon Cox, who is a board director of the Richard Nixon Foundation, but also here with us in person is Ambassador Cui Tiankai, the former Vice Foreign Minister of China, and of course for 8 years the Ambassador of China in Washington. We also have, and we're delighted to welcome to this forum, Ambassador Nirupama Rao, who we knew from Beijing. She was India's ambassador to China, and then became India's ambassador to the United States, and then served as the 28th Foreign Secretary of India. And of course, Rick Waters, the Managing Director of Eurasia Group, and the former United States Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. We welcome all of you to this stage and this conversation.
So, good morning, everyone. Good morning, dear friends. I'm Da Wei. I'm the Director for Center for International Security and Strategy from Tsinghua University, Beijing. So it's really my great honor to join the Hong Kong Forum again, and I would really thank KUSAF for having me here to moderate this panel with those distinguished speakers, panelists. Really my great honor and pleasure. So we have 1 hour on this session, and we have a very timely topic, election 2024, what's next for China-US, for the US and China. So I would like to have a rather free-flow discussion. So I will put forward some questions to our panelists. So I will try to put some very simple, blunt questions, and I hope I can get some very direct, relatively short answers, response to that. And then I hope if we have time, I can open the floor for maybe 10 minutes to raise questions from our audience. So let me raise the first round of the question. I will give all of you the same question. So I hope you can, maybe within 3 minutes, give me a general response about this election. So after you heard the outcome of the election, what's your reaction? What's your initial response to that? I mean, do you think that will bring more challenges to China-US relations, the opportunity, or you think opportunities more than challenges? Do you worry about the outcome or the future China-US relations in general, or not to the country? So, and of course, you can also say, maybe touch upon, if you think, we have challenges ahead, what are those major challenges or the opportunities in next 4 years? So I will start from Ambassador Baucus. Yes.
Well, thank you.
This is your microphone. Yes.
Well, thank you. And I want to also thank Siege Tung for sponsoring this forum. He walked into my office maybe 20, 30 years ago when I was in the U.S. Senate. I was very impressed with him. And every time I've seen him since, equally impressed for all the reasons that we all know. And we thank him very much. And thank all the other participants here. All of you were in public service, and you care. And that's why you're here, and I want to thank you for that too. Well, number one, since the election, it's clear it's not going to be business as usual. If Kamala Harris had been elected, it would be business as usual. We'd be having these discussions, and who knows what progress we'd make. But now Trump's elected, and Trump, if nothing else, is a big disruptor. We don't know what the consequences of all this disruption will be. We've seen the names of the people that he's named to cabinet posts, Rubio, Secretary of State, for example, and Walsh for the National Security Council. I mean, these are people who are very, very hawkish with respect to China. And others are going to be just as hawkish. Donald Trump very much likes tariffs. He's talked about a 60% tariff on Chinese goods coming to the United States, maybe 10 to 20 across the board. Why does he like tariffs so much? The answer, I think, is even though most economists say it's nuts, it's stupid because it raises prices for consumers in the U.S. He likes tariffs for two reasons. Number one, if the United States slaps tariffs on imports coming to the United States, well, that's going to help create jobs. Jobs in the United States. It's jobs. He's a jobs guy. And he got elected in states like Pennsylvania and others primarily because of jobs. Second, he likes tariffs because they raise revenue. And as you know, the United States Congress has to figure out what to do with the Trump tax cuts, which expire at the end of this next year, about $1.3 trillion added to the national debt. So if he can slap on a lot of tariffs, and if he can raise a lot of revenue from tariffs, that means that there's revenue there to maintain some of the tax cuts. I don't think it's going to work, but that's where he is. There's going to be a big tension between the true believers who are anti-China, for example, Rubio and Walsh and maybe the potential defense secretary on the one hand, and then Donald Trump, the deal maker, on the other. Donald Trump will look to do deals. He has a big ego. He wants to be the man in the world stage, and he figures he can put deals together, perhaps with Putin in Ukraine, who knows where, maybe do some deal with China on Taiwan, so that both sides agree it's just going to be the status quo in Taiwan. Neither side is going to get too upset, but he's going to look to do deals. You asked the question, what's the world going to be like, 45 years from now? I will ask another question, what's it going to look like 45 days from now? We don't know. And it could be anything. Some of these names that he's nominated will not make it all the way to January. It's very possible. And it's very, very unknown. I'll close this other point, which perhaps is a bit provocative. As we all know, at least in the United States, there's very little civil discourse. There's such partisanship, a big partisan divide. People aren't talking to each other. They're just their own little silos. Social media's created it, et cetera. And sometimes people ask me, now, Max, what's it going to take to get back to civility? What's it going to take for both sides to talk to each other a little bit? And I really don't have an answer. But sometimes I think maybe things have to get worse before they get better. Sometimes you have to hit bottom before you can finally get something done. Sometimes we need a crisis to force us to work together. This may be that crisis. The election of Donald Trump my judgment, is coming close to that with all the things he's saying and doing. One final point, I just want to very much compliment Boris Tadic, president of Serbia. He makes the key point about we don't understand each other, we don't know each other. And my strong advice is the more we can have more Americans come over to China, visit China, see China, get all around China, eat sticky tofu, just get all around the country, the more these problems are going to start to disappear and evaporate and go away. We just don't know China. We need to do a better job of knowing China on a personal basis, not what you read in the paper, not virtually over the internet, but personally.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Baucus. Now I would like to hear another American colleague's view who is online now. Not Rick later. Mr. Christopher Nixon Cox. Can you share with us your initial reaction or response to the election?
Well, thank you, Professor Dawei. It's great to be with you and to see you again. And I apologize to everyone. I wish I could be with you in person. But the election was decided so much faster than we expected. And the appointments from the Trump administration are happening so quickly that on the Republican side, which I am, necessitated me to remain in the United States. So my apologies for not being with you in person. And I hope to come again another year in person. I echo a lot of what Ambassador Baucus said about the election. I think one thing to note that the policy towards China has changed dramatically since 2016, but was carried by the Trump administration, of course, the Republican administration, and the Democrat administration, which was the Biden administration. So there's a bipartisan consensus towards China that's been developing. And this election seems to confirm that bipartisan consensus. So while there are many hawkish voices around President Trump, that's nothing new from his first term, where there were some very hawkish voices around him. So I think the election portends more of the same from the first Trump administration. However, I do think that there are some areas of optimism for the relationship between China and the United States. First, there is this element of perception driving reality. So for the last 8 years, Americans look to the newspapers and see stories about certain things happening with China, whether it's hacking issues or warnings from the FBI about Chinese activities or things like that. And it reinforces perceptions that have developed. Well, the one great thing about Donald Trump is he doesn't care what people think about him. He'll just cut right through perceptions and do whatever he thinks he should do. And I think in this case, that could be something that's positive for the relationship because he won't be beholden to whatever consensus has been building over the last 8 years. As Max Baucus said, if President Trump sees the opportunity to do a deal, he's going to do that deal, no matter what the public perception is. And the good news about President Trump is because he's viewed as being a hawk and because he's surrounded himself with hawks, he has a lot of latitude to do a deal with China. So I think that we're in a moment very much like the 1970s when my grandfather, an ardent Cold Warrior who came to power based on his reputation as a Cold Warrior, had the ability to go to China. It was really only Nixon who could go to China. And it'd be much harder for a Democrat to do that in the atmosphere of the 1970s. Well, very much like that today, where President Trump has a real opportunity to do something, to do a big deal with China. And I think that as someone who loves the drama and loves the idea of the big deal, I think that President Trump will take that opportunity. So the question then becomes, where are areas that China and the United States could cooperate? And I actually think that, as Henry Kissinger said, where there are mutual interests between China and the United States, the relationship functions best. And I do see some areas where it's very obvious that China and the United States can cooperate. One of those is in the area of agriculture. Whether that's in trade, the United States produces a lot of great agricultural products, and there's a great opportunity to trade with China, or whether it's in development of agriculture in Africa. Both the United States and China have a strong interest in developing agriculture in Africa. For China, it's to bring products from Africa, agricultural products, into China to import them. For the United States, there's a strong desire to see food production increased in Africa so that we promote regional stability among the African states. So I think that's a great possibility for cooperation. The other thing that I would say is, and I hope this continues under the Trump administration, dialogue is so important. So I think this meeting that we have here today, this conference, is just one of many that is so important to continue. Again, as Ambassador Baucus said, dialogue is important so that Americans and Chinese get to know each other better, just as people. It's also important that business leaders come to China, that Chinese business leaders come to America so that we can understand each other better. But there are critical areas, such as the military-to-military relationship, the political relationship, whether that starts at the top with the two leaders but extends down to congressional delegations. All of those are so important, and I think it is so important that dialogue continue on multiple levels to promote understanding and to avoid misunderstandings at the political level that could result in catastrophe. So I think that those areas, there's certainly mutual interests in agriculture and dialogue, and of course in promoting peace around the world. I think the good thing about Donald Trump that we have learned is that he is not a warmonger. He actually abhors war for whatever reason. He likes to talk a tough game, but he doesn't actually like to push the button on war. So I think that's something else where hopefully there can be some grand deal, maybe on Taiwan, on trade, and on Africa. And I think that the Trump administration, led by Donald Trump, will be very open to that. And in fact, this may be the only area where I would disagree with Senator Baucus, but I think with Donald Trump, there's the potential to get a much better deal because he can actually be more flexible and give more away than a Democratic administration, given that he is viewed as a hawk. So I'm naturally an optimist. It's probably a character flaw of mine that I'm an optimist, but I do hope that the next 4 years can bring some areas of improvement in the relationship. Eventually, even though rhetoric may be tough at the beginning, but eventually it will end up in a better place than where it's starting. So that's my hope, and I'm going to stick to that optimistic outlook.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cox. Very interesting remark. Actually, when you mentioned your grandfather, President Nixon's visit to China, you reminds me, a theory in China that people worries about the possibility of Trump to Moscow, rather than President Trump visit China, because at that time we have Soviet Union as in 1972, 71, 72, we have Soviet Union as the common threat. But now China and the US, we have some structural problem. I can put it aside a little bit. Maybe we can discuss that later. Yeah, I want to move to Chinese side. Ambassador Cui Tiankai, you are a veteran, diplomat and served in the U.S. for a very long time. So, what's your takeaway from this election? Are you more optimistic or pessimistic now?
Well, thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here and to join this distinguished panel with two very long-time friends and colleagues of mine, Max and Ambassador Rao, and also with Rick and with Mr. Cox online. I very much look forward to continuing our conversation in Beijing. And with your permission, Dawei, let me first of all say a word of appreciation to all the previous speakers, especially the two ambassadors. Ambassador Xie Feng and I, we were both born in Shanghai. We are actually from the same high school in Shanghai. So thank you very much, Ambassador Xie Feng. And also, Ambassador Burns, Nick and I have been colleagues and friends for many, many years. I hope I will have the opportunity to thank him in person before he leaves Beijing for the good work he has done. And I just hope what he said just now to us will not be his farewell address, will not be even his Thanksgiving Day speech. But anyway, we've got a very challenging subject to discuss. What's next? Early on, people refer to the weather, to typhoon. It's not so easy to make forecasts on weather. Still less to make forecasts on China-US relations. Max just said it's hard to tell what will happen in the next 45 days. But at the same time, on the other hand, the weather is up to the heaven. The China-US relationship is up to ourselves. If we make the right choices, good things could happen. If we make the wrong choice, bad things will happen. So, Dr. Henry Kissinger, we are going to pay tribute to him here this morning. Dr. Kissinger used to say, everything depends on some conception of the future. So, what kind of a relationship we want to build together for the future? What kind of a new world? People talk about world order. What kind of a new order we want to build? And what kind of a world we want to leave for the future generations? As another mentor of mine, Mr. Tung Chih-hua, said, a good future will not come by automatically. We have all worked together for it. So I think for China and the United States, the choice actually is quite clear. As President Xi Jinping said last November in San Francisco, that the fundamental question, the fundamental choice is whether China and the United States will be partners or adversaries. I hope the current administration in the United States will give us a clear-cut and a good answer within maybe next 45 days. If that is not possible, maybe the next administration, within the next 4 years, hopefully we don't have to wait for next 45 years to get a good answer. Of course, I don't want to prejudge anybody's policy right now. So let's
Yeah, of course, we hope for the best. So then let's move to India's perspective. Ambassador Rao, you know, looking from all this, you know, from India's perspective, of course, I want to know what do you think about if that's good for China-US relations. I'm also curious how India view this, because I would say India is playing, from Chinese perspective, quite interesting role in today's, also very important role, of course, in the international order and in this China-US relations. So do you think this outcome is a good news for India or bad news for India? Besides good news for China-US or bad news for China-US? Yes.
Thank you, Professor, and thank you to the China-US.
非常感谢达维教授，非常感谢邀请我参加此次论坛。也就像刚才这个崔大使和博卡斯大使讲到的一样，我们都是紧密共事的同事。我之前在华府呢，也几年前驻任过，所以呢，也跟他们有非常多的工作的来往。那在讲到大选以及对于印度的挑战和机遇这一方面，特别是考虑到特朗普再度当选， 对于中美关系会有何影响这样的一个问题，我相信在座的各位大部分呢都会相信呢，这是中美关系呢应该是这个最具有这个影响最重要的一个双边的战略的关系。所以从今天角度来讲呢，我们是希望这个还能够有外交政策施展的空间，能够有对话作为我们的主线，而不是胁迫或者说霸权作为我们未来世界的一个主要的基调。从印度的角度来讲，就像前面的讲者讲到的一样，我们需要在国家安全和经济利益之间寻求平衡。在寻求这样的一道平衡的过程中，我们如果看一下大选结果，特朗普总统当选，大家都提出了很多的问题和讨论了这样的一种可能，就是在他当选之后，美国的外交政策为何，以及对华关系，当然呢是大家讨论最多的。但是呢，我们之前已经看过特朗普总统在上一届政府中的表现，应该来讲，他的外交政策决策里头呢，还是有非常重要的一些务实主义和现实主义的这个原则的。在《纽约时报》近期的一篇文章里头呢，有讲到他对于这个一些问题的看法。当然，我们也看到了他身边的这些幕僚和相关的一些内阁成员，他们的一些立场。那大家也强调了，他是一个讲究交易的人。他也一直在宣传说，国家之间的关系要有公平贸易。他讲到了加征关税的可能，他在他的一个竞选发言里头一直提要对中国加征更高的关税。他的关税呢是征全球，印度呢也无法幸免。我们在过去20年里头呢，也看到对美的贸易在不断的增长，我们的关系呢也成为了非常全面的全球的战略性的合作关系。伯恩斯大使和很多的一些老朋友也讲到了民主的核心性、重要性。对于印度，我们如果是以人口来计的话呢，我们也是最大的民主国家。同时，印度也非常这个寻求世界的多样性，这也是我们一直秉承的一项重要原则。我们对中国的关系不会以此受到影响，因为我们与中国是最大的邻国，我们有3500公里长的边境线，这个边境线呢还存在一些领土争议，而且在过去很长一段时间也有冲突和敌视。在过去多年里头，两国呢都在致力于在边境线上实现和平与稳定。在过去的4-5年里头，这个和平呢有一些被打破，也带来了一些印度方面的猜疑和不信任的情绪。就像我们最近外长讲到的，而且在多个场合也重复了，就是我们需要3个这个相互的尊重、相互的利益以及相互的敏感性的尊重。这个敏感性的尊重，我觉得这是非常核心的一项原则，特别是国家之间的关系，不管你是和规模、你的区位以及你在全球秩序中是何重要性，都是如此。我们也刚才讲到了多边主义，讲到了这个构成世界格局的所有国家，它的重要性不仅只是中美2个大国。当然，中美是非常重要的一组关系，中美关系会 多方面、多维度的去介入到其他关系之中。多边主义是非常重要的，因为它表达了我们作为全球社会一份子的多样性。
我们需要多边主义。我们看一下联合国需要改革。我想在座的各位都同意，二战以后的世界秩序需要改变了，需要改革开放了。这是中国的说法啊，借鉴中国的说法。我希望未来4年特朗普总统的整个政府能够可以在这些问题上展开有效的讨论，然后呢，重新的来稳固外交的作用、对话的作用，以及这个基于规则的世界秩序。那说到中美关系，我们可以期待一些对话的开展，以及对一些紧张局势的降温。那之前包卡斯大使也说，两国的竞争非常激烈。其实竞争不是坏事，它会让我们做出更多的努力来改善自己、提升自己，从而给人民造福。这就是印度想做的事情。印度现在是增长最快的大型经济体，我们希望发挥领导作用，能够为发展和和平做出贡献，在国际的舞台上扮演更重要的作用。所以这也是我认为中国、美国还有印度之间的合作可以为世界造福。中国和印度也有很多合作，包括我们是在上合组织，我们在同样的这个金砖组织等等。那在特朗普总统第1任期的时候，那他建立了这个4方的会谈。这个机制，印度反复地强调说，这不是用来针对中国的，而是一个论坛，可以促进印太地区国家的合作，而印度呢就是属于印太国家，而且呢它可以支撑人道主义援助，避免气候灾难和自然灾难，还有能源、科技，尤其是影响未来的新科技。那与此同时呢，它也强调要强化基于规则的秩序。那我想这个中方呢也应该理解，我们在这个区域内，台湾是一个热点问题。我们认为台湾的问题的解决，如果能够降低紧张局势，那尽一切的可能避免发生冲突，因为这会伤害到这个地区的每一个国家。所以这些问题一定要严肃对待，就好像俄乌冲突也是一样，或者是中东的冲突也是如此。这些冲突像这个未来潜在的以色列和伊朗之间的冲突，这都是非常危险的一些局势我们说丧钟为谁而鸣？丧钟为你而鸣。好，下面呢是华自强先生。除了对美国大选的印象之外，我还想问一下，这个考克斯和鲍卡斯先生都提到了，特朗普总统呢是一个爱做交易的总统。那我一直存在这个问题：2025年的特朗普政府会和2017年相似吗？或者是2020年相似吗？对我来说，2017年它是一个 他无论是在朝核问题上，还是中美的贸易问题上，他都做了交易。但是2020年的时候，我觉得他是想改变中国的政权。那你对这个问题是怎么看？他现在还是个交易者吗？非常高兴能够参加这次会议，也感谢主办方在一个非常合适的时间给我们提供了这样一个论坛。我觉得要预测是很困难的，但是我想我们可以比较有信心的说当选总统特朗普先生他一定是一个交易者。那么这就是一个讨论的基础。我们和很多发言嘉宾的这种乐观态度一样，他有足够的灵活性，在中美关系方面，他没有任何的恐惧，但是他可能会碰到的挑战也会来自多方面。就像刚才伯恩斯大使说的，中美之间在每个领域其实都是有结构性竞争的，无论是安全、经济还是科技，或者即便是在社会与社会之间，经常受到挑战比方说这个情报界，还有执法界等等。那我想另外一点呢，就是我以前比较习惯的这个结构性框架，是它可以让领导人做好准备去谈判，他们都有动力去采取强硬的立场，就是创造性的解决方案是很少的，就是双方如何和平共处的解决方案是很少的。那双边的这个总统，就算他希望达成交易，他也很难去做好准备去这个谈判。也许我们可能会达成交易，但不会马上达成，可能一开始的阶段需要一个双方试错和看到关税的提升，然后可能才会看到调整。那最后我想强调的是这些时刻是需要领导者和这个架构设计者需要最多帮助的时候。所以像这个全国委员会，还有各位在座的这些人士，我们都希望能够找出一些创造性的解决方式让中美之间形成一个新的平衡。好，非常感谢。我同意您的说法，双方都需要一些这个创造性的解决方案。我们总是希望能够开辟更多的对话的渠道，这是两国急需的。那这个第一轮的讨论呢就结束了，然后呢我开始第二轮，请包卡斯大使。在第一轮的讨论当中我们谈到了大国关系，那比方说像尼克松访华这样的重要事件，你觉得大国关系在特朗普总统任下会发生什么变化？他说我24小时就能结束俄乌战争，也许不是24小时，但是其实也可能。那向着那个方向去努力，美国、欧洲、东亚的关系会发生什么变化？那对中美的影响又是什么？非常感谢这个问题。之前华自强先生说到了一个重要的观点。特朗普总统呢，他是一个这个交易家，但是他国内受到很多限制，比方说在 蒙大拿州有一个参议院的席位在竞争。那这个候选人啊，花了好几千万美元相互攻击。一个呢就说啊，你对中国太软弱了。大家都在说，在华盛顿两党之间唯一有共识的就是对中国的强硬态度，所以在我看来是特朗普总统或者是习主席需要花费大量的政治资本才能达成交易。那特朗普需要用大量的政治资本，如果他想做一些比较勇敢的一些举措或者真的能够发挥较大影响的举措。我觉得这个崔大使也可以补充一下，习主席也是一样，在中国有非常强烈的民族主义的情绪，所以这也会影响到中美之间达成交易的前景。那特朗普是一个美国优先的总统，他是一个倡导保护主义的总统他用301、232等等多条的这个限议，比方说对铝对钢铁呀他是希望能够保护这个国内的钢铁和铝的工业，但是呢，他要针对中国和加拿大来征收很高的关税。那这次他的团队是非常有组织纪律的，而且比上一个团队要好得多。这些都是有坚定信念的人，他们都是一些主流和上一次那些一些这个主流的人士相比，这次的话，这个人选都对他非常的忠诚，所以中美要达成协议是比较困难的。我的判断是，我们现在像这个之前的蔡崇信先生说的，双方在脱钩，虽然不会彻底的断裂，但是确实是在脱钩。经过了几年以后，大家都意识到，就像基辛格博士说的，中国永远都在这儿，美国也永远在这儿。也许我们还是要找到一个办法，能够和平的相处。那就需要对话，需要沟通，需要个人的关系，需要这个双方的频繁的互访。那两个国家都派出了高级别的代表团，他们学到了很多东西。那我觉得这种代表团应该1个月有一批去互访，那可能这个政府就可以少花一些政治资本。好，那考克斯先生，我这一轮的问题还是继续说这个交易。如果特朗普总统未来想和中国达成交易，他的目标是什么？如果说你想达成交易，你总是要有个目标吧。2017年的时候，比方说北朝鲜或者是贸易逆差等等，那这次他的目标是什么呢？那如果说他想达成交易，他的团队会不会破坏他的这些行动？其实我们是比较担心他的内阁成员的，这个内阁成员可能会对他形成较大的这个掣肘。我想2015年的时候，他从这个电梯上下来说他要竞选总统，那我相信对他这个任命的很多的内阁成员来说，他们都是在这次的竞选当中和他站在一起的。 那么他们周围的这个团队呢，也对他比较忠诚，会支持他的这些举措。他想要的一些政策，我们要看就是他能否兑现。我不太担心他的团队，他的很多这个内阁的成员呢是来自于国会。而且呢，他会对选民负责任，他们也会支持特朗普总统的政策。共和党现在呢已经基本是投诚了，所以我想特朗普总统在他的第2个任期会有足够的灵活性，他的团队会支持他的政策。那当然最重要的是，特朗普总统希望实现经济增长。现在通胀很高，所以特朗普总统会抑制通胀。他会通过这个加征100%的关税，去威胁他的这些国家，然后呢，来与他达成协议。第2点，特朗普总统想尽量避免中国和台湾发生任何的冲突，所以他会非常的谨慎。他希望能够留下一个好的遗产。第3方面，他这次周围的人选，比方说像马斯克，还有小肯尼迪亚等等，他们呢都非常的这个关注 AI 的发展。那么在接下来的这些年，特朗普认为 AI 是21世纪最重要的一个技术，所以呢，他会对这个技术呢采取比较鼓励的政策，而且呢，也希望能够和中国一起在 AI 的治理方面制定一些政策。那他在这些方面，他会和中国合作。其实我看到未来机会还蛮多的，两个国家还是有合作的希望的。好，非常感谢。崔大使，我想很多的这个参会者都想问中国会怎么做。比方说明年的1月、2月，当这个特朗普总统宣誓就职以后，他给中国征收60%的关税，那中国怎么办？在中期和长期，中国如何来应对特朗普的总统的第2任期？我想中国做的是完全可以预测的。我们总是说合作能够带来双赢，而这个竞争呢会带来双输，所以我们需要捍卫自己正当的权益，去发展成为一个现代化的国家。我们也会捍卫我们的发展道路和政治体系，这些事情是没法这个谈的包括说这个台湾问题，我们想达成交易的话，有些领域是禁忌的，是不能谈的。那当然还有很多的方面我们是可以达成协议的。
那不管我们能够是否达成交易，还是取决于我们对于这个 这个代价的判断。那这个代价问题和区域和领域会有不同。但如果我们看一下大局，比如说一些宏大的问题，气候变化、疾病领域的合作，以及非常鼓舞人心、非常有挑战的这个科技领域，那所有这些不同的领域，我们是否在两国之间会各自来解决问题，还是携手来面对？我们会彼此削弱，还是互相帮助？那这一点是非常明确的。那这个应该不只是中美两国之间的交易，因为我们并不是世界上唯一的两个国家。我想刚刚博卡斯大使也还有我们的拉奥奇大使都讲到印度、其他国家以及全球南方，那我们需要两国携手和世界上其他国家一起来解决这个问题。如果我们来关注这个宏大的这个共同的一些利益的领域，我相信是可以，而且应该可以达成交易。好的，谢谢大使的分享。两方达成协议，我们需要确实需要在这些领域达成协议、达成交易。好，再次感谢刚刚拉奥奇大使分享了从印度的这个观点。那如果您有这样一个机会，比如说与特朗普总统和习主席现在和他们当面进行交流，您会提出什么样的建议？如何稳定双边关系，同时惠及全世界？我们可以您从这个第三方国家一个中性的这个角度来跟我们做一个分享吗？那是的，我其实和两国元首都曾经以印度的这个角度来做我观点的分享。我相信两国之间不能够彼此这个关系的这样断联。那我们这个后果影响，以及两国之间冲突的威胁会影响所有人，这是我要说的第一点。那第二点呢？我相信，也许习主席也许会对这一点要比当选总统特朗普更理解的一点，就是我会讲到战略自主性。当印度这样的一些国家在讲战略的自主性的时候，我们并不是在选边站队，我们并不是在说哪一个国家更好，哪一个不好，那其实是在于捍卫我们自身的利益。这是关于按照我们自身的这个节奏进行发展。这是因为我觉得这个政策就像刚刚塞尔维亚前总统塔迪奇总统也讲到，这是必须要和我们本国的发展相一致的，而不轻易的选边站队，而是去有合作伙伴，有共同这个利益、共同的这个价值观去捍卫，这个是至关重要。对于国家的架构，对于他们的外交政策、经济政策都是尤为重要的。那这是我想要讲的第二点。第三点，讲到全球南部、全球南方，我相信我会想全球大多数人所关切的一点，就是聆听，去重视聆听的这项艺术，了解我们的优先事项是什么，什么能够真正打动我们的心。有时候我们对于这些问题是缺乏敏感性，每当涉及这些超级大国的时候，我们在历史当中的这个经验，我们看到过去20年，美国和印度的双边关系的发展，那在过去50年左右的中国和印度双边关系的发展，我也想 也许会有一些相互的这个智慧的这个碰撞，但是我相信交流也会带来更多的一些观点
360-degree view，
我们全方位来做一个评估，就是想象你是一个 IMAX 的这个全方位360度的这个屏幕一样，有全方位的视角。不好意思那我之前说想给我们观众提问的时间，但现在可能没有那么多时间了。我们想最后一轮的一个分享。那我们今年在香港做这个论坛，您觉得这个美国大选对于香港的未来，比如说未来4年是有什么样的影响？好消息还是坏消息现在来讲可能有点为时过早了。我觉得我们很多人来说我们很喜欢香港这个城市，我们在香港留下了珍贵的记忆。那我们都希望香港和香港人民取得成功，但是现实情况就是目前所有的这个事情都相互交织的，都是在这样一个非常具有竞争的这个背景之下的。那我觉得两国在管理所有的事务上，那即使我们的这个利益不一样的这样的情况下，我们必须要非常清楚的一点，就是在明确的一些这个战略方面，并没有双边的两党的这个共识。但我相信美国需要去明确他能够接受什么。知道你的这个战略的前提是，首先你需要有什么样的一些方式和工具才能达到这一个目标。那没有美国政府的这个总统有曾经去考虑这个所谓的这个人权的改变。那在这过程当中有很多的这个恐惧，相反他们应该更加聚焦于美国的更应该优先考虑的一些事项，对于美国人民更为重要的一些事项，特别是在经历非常具有挑战的这个时期之后，是可以找到解决方案的。感谢您最后的对于中国和美国的这个建议。我相信我们两国需要更有信心，也完全同意您刚刚说的这一点。中国是一个非常安全的国家，我自己是非常相信这一点，至少在政治上是非常安全的。我觉得美国也处于非常好的这个非常安全的一个局面，无论是在经济还是国家安全方面。那当然在很多领域中美之间还是有可能还有10年的这个差距，中国需要去赶超。我相信两方其实也可以稍微放松一点。我相信特朗普当选的这个结果让很多中国的人感到非常的紧张，当然他们感觉就更没办法放松了。我觉得至少就是我们要放松放轻松，然后更有耐心。那未来6个月可能会在短期内中国会面临更多的一些挑战，但是就长远看来，我们可能要放轻松互相的交流，更多的互动，那寻求任何可行的交易达成，就像我们今天所有的这个论坛嘉宾所建议的那样。好的，再次感谢我们的论坛的嘉宾，感谢我们的观众，也不好意思我们没有给观众提问的机会了，因为我作为主持人没有很好的把控时间。好，请大家一起鼓掌，感谢我们的各位的嘉宾，谢谢。谢谢我们的论坛嘉宾。那好的，我们先稍等，我们在舞台上先一起来拍一张合照。总统
We'll not be having a break. We'll